Our Rotary Club, the Rotary Club of Tiburon Belvedere, partnered with the library to bring in our favorite speakers, because at our meetings we have speakers. And so we pre-screened them, and Jeffrey is approved as one of the good ones.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Well, it's really nice to be here. It's really an honor. You know, I want to thank the Tiburon Belvedere Library, especially Kathleen, and also Judy Wilson in particular, if Judy is here. I want to thank the beautiful and really resourceful Tiburon Library, especially Katie Winters and Rebecca Jung. So, speaking of Rotary, my father and grandfather were both Rotarians. My father, upon his death in 2020, was the longest serving Rotarian in the United States. 75 years. He was a member of Rotary, which means he ate a lot of dry chicken dinners over those years. So Rotary is in my blood, and I've spoken to a number of Rotary clubs over the years in Marin and Sonoma counties, and it's always an honor. So I'm going to start out this way. It's June 2004. Ronald Reagan has died. Myself, along with KPIX photographer Henry Fubusevich and producer Gretchen White, are sent to Washington, D.C. to cover the state funeral. Is this thing making a lot of noise? Yeah, I think it is. To cover the state funeral. So we go to Washington. The president lies in state in the Capitol Rotunda for 43 hours prior to being taken to the National Cathedral where they have the funeral. So reporters were allowed to come in small groups in the Rotunda while the public was passing through. And our time came, and we were escorted to an area behind one of those velvet, burgundy ropes with the brass stanchions, and we're standing behind there, and Henry's there with his camera, and Gretchen's there, and we're watching the crowd come through, and then all of a sudden they don't bring any more people through the double doors. And then the room is empty except for the 4 honor guard at 4 points of the coffin. And then double doors open, and in comes Mikhail Gorbachev. And, with his Italy-shaped birthmark and all, he comes into the rotunda. He stands there solemnly, and, God, it seemed like for almost a minute. And then he leaves. Henry, my photographer, who is absolutely fearless, says, "Let's go get him." So we literally walked out of the rotunda and was jogging down the hallway in the Capitol trying to catch up with Mikhail Gorbachev and his, group. And he dodged, hung left into the Senate leader's office, which was Bob Dole, and that was the end of it. Now, in the Capitol at that time, and I imagine till today, they have very strict protocol on where the media can go and not go. And the only place you could do an interview was at something called the Ohio Clock, which was really this ugly clock, probably from Ohio, that was in this little alcove in a remote location where you were supposed to meet people and do the interviews. No one was ever supposed to trot through the hallways of the Capitol going after somebody like Gorbachev. Gorbachev disappears into the office, and within 2 or 3 minutes, the head of media protocol comes over and kicks us out of the Capitol building. Kicks us out, which we thought was hilarious because, what do we know? We're from California and the whole bit. The mistake that he made, was that the doors they let us out through led to a circular driveway on the east side of the Capitol where dignitaries come and go. And there was a big limousine there. And who pops out but Mikhail Gorbachev? So Henry Fubusevich, who grew up in Russia and has all the nerve in the world, yells out to Gorbachev. He says, "Mr. President, could we ask you a question?" And could we ask you a question, Mr. President? In Russian, obviously. And Gorbachev turns, and then he turns back. He's got a couple of guards with him or whatever. And he says, no, please, we'd really like just to ask you a quick question. So he steps forward. He comes about maybe 18 feet away from us on this thing. And he says, Sophie, come on up here and tell me what he says. Sophie is our dear friend and here in Tiburon, and just graduated from Del Mar, right? Just the other day. And so what did Gorbachev say?
He said, "Был он хорошим человеком."
Which means in English, I am a cheese sandwich. Now, what it really means is he was a good man. So not only did we have the video of him coming into the rotunda, but we had this comment from the former president of Russia, which was a tremendous scoop. And because we were CBS, we gave it to CBS and they had it exclusively. And so that was a great day. A month later, my contract was up for renewal. Do you think I got renewed? I did. So that was a very, very fun moment in my career. So I started, my first professional broadcast job was actually in Colorado. But in 1985, I came to Marin County. I got a job as the news director at KTIM. I don't know if anybody remembers that station, but you know, it was a rock station in the FM and a jazz station on the AM. I worked there for 2 years, and I went to, I ended up at, you know, KGO TV on their morning show. And then I went to KPIX Channel 5, where I was an anchor and reporter for, you know, 20 years. It was during that time that we won the Peabody for coverage of the Loma Prieta earthquake. That was KCBS radio, so I'm a shared recipient is what they say. My interest in broadcasting goes back to when I was literally a boy, and I feel really fortunate about it. The first person I have any memory of on television was Walter Cronkite. And I was probably 6 years old and sitting on the floor in our sunroom watching our old Zenith 19-inch black and white TV and seeing this Walter Cronkite. I will never forget that image of him. So as I grew older, I wanted to meet Walter Cronkite because I was developing this interest in broadcasting, you know, writing on the school newspaper and all this stuff. So I was lucky enough to get to go to the CBS Broadcast Center in New York. And was given a tour, and we go to the newsroom, and I can see Walter Cronkite over in his office over there with his platinum hair. And I'm like, can I see him? Can I meet him? No, you can't meet him. So a couple of years go by, actually more than a couple of years, and I'm on Nantucket Island, where I'm from, and we got word that Cronkite had his sailboat in the marina there. So a friend of mine and I tried to make it down to his boat, but they wouldn't let us get past a certain point. So there I was, jinxed again, trying to meet Walter Cronkite. Flash forward to 1984, the Democratic National Convention in San Francisco. Cronkite walks from the Sky booth and he's headed to the men's room. We see him, I'm on radio at that time, we see him, I bolt into the men's room behind him. But upon seeing him, completely chicken out. So I didn't get to do that. So now, pardon me belaboring this story, but it's really, you know, the reason in great part I got into broadcasting. It's 1984. My former wife, Margaret, and I are vacationing on Martha's Vineyard. And we would have breakfast at the Harbor View Hotel. The night before, we were having dinner with friends, and they said, you know, Cronkite's here, or he has a home here. He's probably in the book. Why don't you call him up? And I said, there's no way that he's in the phone book. You're kidding me. And they pulled over a phone book, and indeed, it said W. Cronkite on something road, and has a phone number. So the next morning, Margaret makes me go to a payphone and call Walter Cronkite. And I'm scared to death. The first thing I do is I go into the men's room and stare in the mirror, and I basically say to myself, if you're any kind of a reporter, you can get on the phone and call up Walter Cronkite. So I dialed the number, It rang and it rang and it rang. And finally, a woman answers the phone, and it's his maid. And Mr. Cronkite is in New York City. Thank God. End of that story. 1 year later, we are at the Harbor View Hotel again and having breakfast, and Margaret says, "You got to call Cronkite." I swear to God. Same phone booth. I dial the number. It rings and it rings and it rings. And all of a sudden I hear, "Hello?"
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Schaub. I'm a reporter in San Francisco.
I said, I really didn't know what to say because I didn't expect them to answer the phone. I basically said, I work for CBS, my wife works for ABC, we're out here, and we were just wondering if maybe, there was some kind of way that maybe, we could meet you, and, well, I don't know. I've got the boys here at the house, and it's very busy working on the boat, and I don't know. How about noon? So we were shocked. We drove around to bookstores trying to find one of these books that he had done about sailing, and we finally found the book, and showed up 15 minutes early, standing there going, "Oh, wait, we can't show up early, And showed up, and I got to meet Walter Cronkite. And it was wonderful. And we became friends. The both of us became friends with he and his wife, Betsy. The following year, we went out on his boat. And I had the boys with us, Taylor and Christopher, and yeah, that's right. And Taylor, who's a broadcaster in LA who does sports for Spectrum One television, says his career really began on Walter's boat because there's a picture of him on the boat. So here you had a guy who went from trying to meet Walter Cronkite at his yacht in the Nantucket boat basin to a man eventually sailing on Walter's Cronkite from Martha's Vineyard to Nantucket. So that was the biggest dream come true for me. Now I got to look this up and figure out where I'm going from here, okay? So bear with me. Who am I? Where am I? So a few things that I wrote down. I've really been, it's been amazing for me what I've been able to do, and I'm very humbled about it, but I've flown on a blimp. I flew with the Blue Angels and pass out. I've been in several helicopters. A really cool restored B-17 bomber that had come into Oakland, and Air Force One between Los Angeles and San Francisco when Obama was in the White House. And the Queen Mary, too. So in 2007, the Queen Mary makes her maiden call to San Francisco. And it's a big deal. It's a big ship. It's never been here. There's a lot of fanfare about it. And Don Ford, who was another photographer that I worked with very closely, another go-getter kind of a guy. And we were talking and we said, we got to find a way to get out on this ship, which was virtually impossible, we felt, but we pursued it anyway. So we contacted Cunard Line, we met with the Port of San Francisco, and the Harbor Pilots Association in San Francisco. Does anybody know what a harbor pilot is? Okay, so they basically go out and guide these giant ships into the bay, and they take over control of the ships from the captain because who knows best how to navigate the bay. So anyway, we arranged to go out on a pilot boat 8 miles out in the ocean to board the Queen Mary, okay? And so this is what's fascinating to me. So there's like a mothership for harbor pilots out in the bay, out in the ocean. And it has a galley, and there's a sleeping area, and there's a TV room with recliners, and the boats come and go. They go out to meet boats, they do whatever they're doing. So we went there, then we got on another pilot boat, bright orange boat, and we headed out to the Queen Mary. So we come alongside the ship, and here we are. I mean, it's 21 stories tall. And we have to climb up into this ship on a 18-inch wide metal ladder that's hanging from the ship, and carrying a 40-pound camera, my photographer, and gear, and I'm got the tripod strapped onto my back, and then a backpack and what else, and we're having to climb up this ladder to get up into this ship, and I'm looking down, and the water is just rushing through like a river between both vessels, just like this, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Ah! They had to wait till low tide to bring the Queen Mary under the bridge because it was so high. And so it was all timed out perfectly, so that the ship got going and came in, and we went as high up as we possibly could. And I didn't know this was done, and I was live on TV at the moment that we were coming under the bridge, and the ship's horn blasted, and the bridge's horn, foghorn blasted, and acknowledging each other, and it was just an incredible moment. So that's another highlight of mine. There we go. So I've had a love affair with the Golden Gate Bridge, like a lot of you have, ever since I was a boy. And I grew up in New Jersey, but I was well aware of the bridge. And my father had served on the board of the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit, so it sort of ran in the family. I was able to cover the 50th anniversary and go out on the middle of the bridge, and we had one of those earlier cell phones. You remember the brick? You remember those things? Elia and my friend Elia back there. And anyway, so the thing dies halfway through midpoint, and I have to run like a nutcase, dodging people right and left back to our broadcast. We had an RV at the northern end of the bridge to broadcast from. I got to carry the Olympic torch partway across the bridge in 1992. They had taken the torch around the world, and it came to San Francisco, and I have a picture of myself holding this thing with the flame. So I've had a thing about the bridge ever since. In 2016, let's back it up a few years. Several years ago, the Bridge District announced that they were going to repaint the cables on the span. And so they started to paint the cables, and you'll see in a moment why this was important. But then the work stopped, and I drive across. At that time, I was driving across the bridge every day, and so I wondered what's going on. Why did they stop the work? Because the cables look like crap. And so I did some investigating, and we ended up doing a couple of special stories.
Thousands of people drive across it every day. Tourists come from all over the world to admire it. The Golden Gate Bridge. It's a Bay Area icon. But we discovered some important maintenance work hasn't been done in decades. Why not? KPIX5's Jeffrey Schaub got some answers, starting across the bay.
This may look like just a simple work site, but it's not. These are Caltrans bridge painters hunkered down on a platform suspended midair, painting and repainting the underside of the western span of the Bay Bridge, a process that's been going on for over 9 decades.
If we don't paint the bridge, then the bridge rusts.
First they have to grind down the steel, then they smooth it out, then they apply 2 coats of primer, and then 2 coats of paint. And they have to do all that because they might not be back here again for 20 years. If I were to tell you that the cable on the Golden Gate Bridge has not been painted in its entirety since 1937, would you be concerned about that?
I'd be very concerned.
If you didn't paint the cable, could there be corrosion up there?
There'd be lots of corrosion.
And it shows. This is a side-by-side aerial view of both bridges. On the Golden Gate, virtually the entire length of the cable housing, think of it as a long tube,
shows wear and tear.
You know, you raise a good point, Jeffrey.
To find out why this iconic beauty is so badly in need of a makeover, we sat down with Golden Gate Bridge General Manager Dennis Mulligan.
So we have different time frames for different components of the bridge based on what's needed for those components.
Mulligan says the cable casing may look bad, but the 27,000 individual steel strands inside are pristine. But that could change if moisture seeps inside if the outer tube corrodes away. And the Bridge District has known about that threat for decades.
It's one small step for man.
In 1969, while Neil Armstrong walked the moon, a consultant engineering firm walked the bridge and issued this report recommending the main cable be painted ASAP. That never happened. Knowing that the entire cable had only been spot painted since the 1930s, 5.5 years ago, with great fanfare, the district announced that the entire cable would be painted, and they started the work, but then suddenly stopped. Current bridge engineers announced that the handrails on the cable needed to be replaced. It was all over the media. This was a big deal.
Yeah, my hunch is that the engineering evaluation had not been done, and at that time it was not known that the hand ropes were approaching the end of their useful service life.
Caltrans District Director Bijan Sartipi says painting the main cable is critical.
And a steel bridge, one of the main barriers that we use, one of the main line of defense that we have, is to paint it so that the bridge does not get rusted, so that the structural integrity of the bridge is not compromised.
And what about the Golden Gate's South Tower?
The South Tower appearance doesn't, meet what people expect when they come here.
Mulligan says it is purely cosmetic, but
South Tower, I've only known what I've seen, and it's there's a lot of corrosion there, and that's about all I've.
You mean rust?
Rust.
Even a member of the Golden Gate Bridge Board of Directors has concerns about the cable and the South Tower. Dietrich Stroh is a nationally recognized civil engineer.
You've asked me if I'm concerned about it. Yes, I'm concerned about it. And that's why I was talking to staff about it. When are we going to get this moving?
Then there's the money. The Bridge District set aside tens of millions of dollars to paint the bridge back in 2011. But Stroh says it was spent on other projects.
It's got to get put into the capital budgets to get it done.
Okay, so what happened to that money?
Well, we've got to use it other places.
Jeffrey Schaub, KPIX-5.
Now, just today, KPIX-5 was able to obtain a copy of an internal budget document which shows that the Bridge District hopes to start funding a cable painting project by 2018, with the project possibly completed by 2022.
Guess how much work has been done since that time? Zero. Okay? The Bridge District did receive $400 million from Congress, thanks to Nancy Pelosi, and they are making plans to do some work, but they need tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars more to do the work, including earthquake retrofitting the bridge, which has never been completed, even though it's been, almost 30 years since Loma Prieta? All the other state-owned bridges in the Bay Area were retrofitted within 5 years after the major earthquake. So that's where we are on that. And as they say, stay tuned. So that brings me to wildfires, an entirely different subject, but I covered wildfires at Channel 5. But when I transitioned to KCBS News Radio in 2012, I really started doing more and more coverage. And of course, in 2017, the Tubbs fire happened in Sonoma and Napa counties. It was devastating beyond means. I remember driving up there that morning at like 3:30 in the morning and passing Novato and having to stop at the Chevron station. And there were families just sitting in their cars like refugees. And then driving up the highway, and you couldn't, it was like Thule fog. You couldn't see anything because the smoke was so dense. And then just one after another, fire rigs and medical ambulance equipment just were screaming up the highway trying to get to the area. And then I think it was 2020, the Camp Fire happened in Paradise. I went up there, I think that day I was one of the first reporters up there. And I remember I arrived at noon and it was pitch black. And all of the streetlights were on. All of the signs, electronic signs for businesses were on. And it tricked your mind. It made you think like it really was nighttime. But it was this massive black cloud that was sitting over, this was Chico, from this humongous fire. So I also more and more became interested in and covered local efforts in the North Bay to prepare for wildfire, right? This gentleman knows from the Marin Independent Journal newspaper. And so I did that, and then most recently, before I retired in March, I did this story for KCBS.
Marin County Fire Department Captain Matt Watson starts up a wildland fire truck. He and Battalion Chief Jordan Reeser are headed to Mount Tamalpais. Where are we going today?
Right now we're on Panoramic Highway. We're going to go and look at some of our target hazards.
Hazards that could lead to a major wildfire on Mount Tamalpais, which hasn't happened since 1929.
But I think the potential for large-scale loss of homes is definitely a real threat here.
Defense level for the coast.
Tam is overgrown with vegetation amid thousands of homes that didn't exist in 1929.
Mount Tam isn't just one community. I think a lot of people relate Mount Tam to Mill Valley, but it also covers Corte Madera, Larkspur, Kentfield, Ross, San Anselmo, Fairfax. These all were just
and the obstacles to getting fire trucks in and evacuees out are huge.
This is a very narrow road.
We just passed by a large redwood that slowed us down.
There's a lot of vegetation along the road corridors that precludes us from passing where we need to, and also can contribute to fire behavior during a fire.
To reduce the threat of fire, Marin County conducts prescribed burns, bulldozers create fire breaks, and homeowners are encouraged to do their part, because a wildfire is not a matter of if, but when.
There's a lot of things we can do, and part of that is having our evacuation routes, our home hardening, our defensible space, but I don't think it's overly dramatic to think that it's potential for us to for it to happen here.
One place where it has happened several times, Sonoma County, which in 2017 alone lost nearly 5,000 homes to the Tubbs and Nuns fires. We rode along with Sonoma County Fire District Division Chief Rob Bisorti and crew aboard the agency's Sonoma 1 helicopter.
It's incredible to not just see the topography and the fuels, but how big our county is.
A county that spans over 1 million acres. Compare that to San Francisco with just 29,000 acres.
We're just starting to fly over the Mayakama Mountains, and you can see the burn scar from the Kincaid fire. And then to our south, you can see the burn scar from the Tubbs.
Since those devastating blazes, the county and its cities have required new construction meet strict fire mitigation standards. Emergency notification technology has been upgraded. Mountaintop fire detection cameras installed. Bisorti says it's something we all play a role in.
It's a constant process. Fuel management isn't something you do once. It's something you have to constantly do to maintain defensible space and to keep the fuels mitigated.
Tomorrow, in part 3 of our series, KCBS reporter Matt Bigler looks at how many California homeowners have been hardening their homes to prepare for wildfires. In Sonoma and Marin counties, Jeffrey Schaub, KCBS.
So no pictures, but may be very proud to be able to do that work. And KCBS has had a long-term commitment to covering this subject. They're one of the chief sponsors of the Ember Stop event at the Marin County Civic Center, which is held in September, which is all about learning about ways to prevent wildfire, protect your home, and so forth. And, you know, we live in this wonderful community here, Tiburon and Belvedere, 2 small towns. We live near the water. There's a high, humidity level here compared to other areas, but the threat of wildfire is just as significant here as it is anywhere else. We saw that on Angel Island just a few years ago when a fire destroyed about 45% of that island. So it's definitely something to take into account. So that's what I have to say about what I've had the privilege of doing all these years, and I hope to continue to do in other ways. And thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Anybody have any questions? If not, that's okay. Hi.
So now that you're retired, is that what you